I wondered what was happening.
I was being murdered. I was being murdered to death. Murdered to death, Sam.
I wonder what was happening.
Yeah.
community.
All right. Here we go.
It's on.
What, pledge?
Pledge, you want to?
Yeah, oh yeah, I feel like we should. All right, good morning. Do we have a lady here? Yes, we have at least one. Lady and gentlemen, let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and good morning. I hope it's warm where you are. And we are watching the meter spin at the OC. All right, roll call vote, please. Or vote, roll call. Chandra?
Yes, Alderman Alder,
Here.
Alderman Flores,
Here.
Alderman Galloway,
Here.
Alderman Poston,
Here.
Alderman Smith,
Here.
I believe.
Here.
Thank you. We have four.
All righty. Well, Mr. Childers, take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I appreciate you guys getting on the call. We have just a small agenda, but an important agenda this morning for the breakfast meeting. And the first one is going to be on some proposed budget amendments. We have a very unique opportunity that has been presented to us in this time of chaos, and pretty much presented to us because of the chaos that we went through in 2020. And Mary is going to explain that in just a minute. And you will see the budget amendments that we are proposing. And the reason why we're doing that is because, remember, as we were working through last year, there were a lot of unknowns all the way up until the final day of December. And we didn't pass our budget until December because we were waiting on information, different revenues, different expenditures. And so when we passed the budget, we did the best that we could to project what those end of year 2021 revenues were going to be, what those end of year 2020 expenses were going to be, so we would know what our carryover was. But be that as it may, at the very end of the year, we had, in the very beginning of 2020, we had some additional revenue that came in that we were not expecting. And so I'm going to go to the slideshow right now. I'm going to share the screen, and Mary is going to first explain the revenue side of this and why we are where we're at, which is a good situation. But I want to stress that this is sort of a one-time influx of cash that we did not know we were going to have. So the whole premise is, how do we maximize the benefit of this? And so often Ozark finds itself in a position where we don't have as many sustainable, reoccurring annual revenue sources as we would like, i.e. the use tax didn't pass. Things like that where we're going to create new revenue on an annual basis. This is sort of a one-time influx of new money that we will not be getting as we move through the years over the next 4 or 5 years. So after talking to all the department heads and obviously taking everything into account we've talked about the needs of the city, looking back at what we were trying to do with the use tax funds, we want to be able to utilize this to make those capital purchases or capital expenditures so that we can get ahead of the game, because we simply don't know what the future holds. And so that's really where we're at. And I just wanted to give you the premise behind where we're thinking right now. And so we're going to go to the first slide, and Mary's going to explain that to you so you understand why we're at this particular spot. So this is the revenue slide, and this is going to be money that is currently available and unencumbered because it is not a dedicated revenue source in another fund. So Mary,
Yes.
I'm going to switch it over to you and let you talk about this, okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
good.
How did you can? I know you're in that big room, so.
Okay, I'll try to talk a little louder. This is a unique situation, and it's a good situation to be in. Usually when I'm talking to you, I'm telling you there's no money, but in this case, we do have, as Steve said, a one-time additional funds, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit about where those funds came from. The first one, and of course, the biggest portion of that is the CARES Act fund. And I'm sure most of you, I think Mike has talked a couple of times about the CARES fund. The majority of that came from first responder salaries, which for the city, that was police department reimbursement of police salaries. So that's the bulk of that $735,000. There were some other reimbursements that we've already paid for, we've already accounted for, some computers, some laptops that enable us to work from home, some disinfectant products, things like that. But that money has come back to us now, and it can be used. It's a reimbursement, so there are not any restrictions on how it can be used. We of course paid off the PFC and LCRA loans with Springfield First Community. Those were pledged. There was a CD pledged for those loans, and we used that CD to pay them off. And we had $117,000 left over. So we did get a check back from Springfield First Community for $117,000. That was the remainder of that CD. The next item is, we don't actually have that money on hand, but if the council were to purchase Garrison Springs and utilize the grants that are available through the state, I believe, we would get $131,000 back. So we're including that in this 1.3 million. And I think when you see Steve's presentation and Sam's, you'll understand more about where that money will come from. The other item is the $316,250. That is just a collection of things. I would tell you that when I make that projection in September for $2.5 million, that's what it is. It's a projection. And almost every year it's anywhere from $200,000 to $350,000. We all operate very conservatively. We budget conservatively. In September, when I called, I'm gonna pick on Jeremy, when I call him and say, are you gonna use all of the money in your transportation projects or in GIS line item for that budget, he will tell me either yes or no, and he makes every effort to follow through with that. But he tells me what the worst case scenario is. He tells me what he absolutely believes the worst case, and he will spend all of it or a portion of it. And that's what everyone does. And so we estimate the worst case scenario and hope for. In this case, we've got $316,000. That is a better case. Sales tax came in a little higher than we had anticipated for both November and December. Salary line items are hard to project. There's always a little bit left in that, and we have a couple, 200 or 300 line items that make up this number. It's not just one or two. I could sit here for a couple of hours and go through that, but you don't want to hear that. Christian County paid one of their quarterly sales tax that they give us towards projects. They paid that early, so that was almost $40,000, that one line item. So those are the kinds of things that make up that $316,000 and come up to the 1.3 million. So that's the reason we have the additional funds. That's the main reason. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them. Okay, good deal.
Does everybody understand that? So basically, you got to see a picture of, we set the budget, we project what the ending balances are going to be for expenditures and for revenues. Then we move, that's how we get the 2021 budget from 2020 to 2021. And as Mary explained, we simply ended up much better. We didn't even know we were going to get what we were going to get back from the CARES Act funding. We had turned in a lot of applications, and some of them were approved and some of them were not. But we didn't know until the last minute what we were actually going to receive back, or which applications they had approved. So it was really at the end of the year that we knew that. So now going forward, we find ourselves in this very positive situation in that, typically trying to find the funds in the regular operating budget to make large capital improvements or large capital purchases is very difficult to do. And you're just not able to do that because it's not in the normal operating budget of the revenue that's coming in. So now, based on the needs that we know we have, based on really trying to get ahead of where we know we need to be 10 years down the road, just like we presented in our campaign for the use tax, which did not pass, I think it is my recommendation to the board, after working with my department heads, that we need to try to get as far ahead of the game as we can in some of the capital purchases and improvements so that we can knock some of those off the list, because again, we don't know what's coming down the road. So here's what we would like to propose. Sam, can you go to that next slide?
Sorry, it's hard to control.
Okay, so we're going to start with the amount of money that Mary said that we're going to work with. We talked a lot about this, Mary and I, and we know that this isn't every dime of it, but this is where we felt like we wanted to stay. So I don't want you to think, oh, Steve's spending or recommending that we spend all the money that we have cash in bank at the end of 2021. That is not the case. We chose a safe, secure, conservative number of the funds that we had that she just showed you, and still have the ability to end the year in a very positive situation to carry over to going into 2022. So here's where we're at. I think that you all know that nobody's going to be shocked when I say that the Public Services Police Department building is not a facility that we're extremely proud of. It is not a facility that we feel is going to take us into the future 10, 20, 30 years. But you know what? The citizens decided they didn't want to build those new facilities. They didn't want to support new taxes like the use tax. We have the facilities that we have. And so we're going to try to maximize the benefit of those facilities the most that we can. And that is going to include something called the Brick Street remodel. At the very last part of 2020, we learned that the church that occupied space in the Brick Street between our municipal court and our police department was going to end their lease with the city. So that freed up space in the Brick Street building that we did not have access to. So now we have that available space, and we need to do something with it because, quite frankly, we need the space ourselves. The city has absolutely no more office space. Our facilities are maxed out, and we need to do something. So you're going to see in a minute what we're talking about, and the chief is going to go through what the details of what the Brick Street remodel actually is, and that's $400,000, and that gets us a long way down the road with facility improvements. Another thing the chief is going to talk about is trying to catch up on our public safety equipment. That's going to be vehicles. That's going to be equipment that they need. That's going to be trying to advance the technology for our police officers to have the best equipment that we can so we can be more efficient and so we can do a better job. We're just behind the 8 ball on that, and it is very difficult to catch up on these large scale numbers in the regular operating budget. The other thing that obviously you know about is the Garrison Springs real estate. Look, we have made the offer that you authorized Sam to make. We got a counter offer back, and the price that the property owner and the city has ended on is $380,000, right in the range that we wanted to be at, right in the range that we told you we would need to be at to make this work. So remember, we have to make that expenditure, and then the money, as Mary showed you in the earlier slide, gets reimbursed to us. The revenue that you saw Mary present coming back, I think it was about $137,000. That's just one of the grants. We will not be reimbursed for the other grant, which is the federal grant, until the actual landowner leaves the premises. And that isn't going to happen until April of 2022 or the spring of 2022. So we will not be reimbursed the other money until 2022. But be that as it may, if this is a project the Board of Alderman decides they want to go forward with, this is what it's going to cost. So we budgeted that $380,000 because we did not have that budgeted because we didn't have a deal. We didn't know when we were going to do it. I also want to point out that there are some soft costs associated with that aren't budgeted. The appraisal, the forestry plan that's required by the grants, the closing and title costs. You're not shocked about that. but there are some immediate capital improvement costs that we have to do with Garrison Springs to make this work. And that is security, and that is controlling the access to that property, which is why we said gate. That is going to be about $30,000 that we also don't have approved. So very fortunate that we have this money. Another thing that we've been trying to get done, and Mr. Poston, I think you're going to be, I hope you're smiling about this one. You better be. Now, I know how important this is, and I want you to know that this means a lot to me too. There are a lot of people in this town that don't have a place to go with their kids that need it. And this is an important project. And this is going to be able to get us something that a lot of other cities don't have, right, or our size. And so this inclusive park is, I think, a great addition to our park system. I think it is something that we are going to be able to brag on a lot, as we move forward. And so it would be great to be able to close the door on this, because finding the additional donations, as we've tried for years, it's very hard to go out there and find the philanthropy to build these things. So if we have this opportunity, hey, I say we take it. And I say we get something done that we can brag about and say, look what we've done. This is important. And maybe we gain a little bit of political capital out of that. And maybe we get people to say, hey, you know what, this is a great town, let's reinvest in it. And that's a bigger discussion, but you get my point. The reason why I have the city administrator discretionary fund is I'm going to be a little bit vague on purpose here. I think you all recall a few months ago that I had a conversation with you with some other specialists in the room about an upcoming franchise agreement that is going to be due in a couple of years. There is the topic of renewing that franchise agreement is a very important topic. It has to do with the utility. And we all heard how important that would be to secure a sustainable future for the city of Ozark. Be that as it may, we have to do some due diligence to understand whether or not that, what does that mean? What does that cost? How would we move forward with that project? And I just got some information on the scope of work of the initial study we would need to do the other day from a qualified engineering firm, quite frankly, one of the only ones that do this, the only one in the area that I know that does this. And that was about $30,000. And so I'll leave it at that, but I just thought it would be just as easy with Mary's approval to include that additional cost into the city administrator's discretionary fund so that I would be able to engage, bring that contract to you. The Board of Alderman obviously would have to enter into that engineering services contract. And be able to do that. But I just wanted to throw that out there because that was not budgeted, but it was something that we were talking about that now we can move forward. And the last thing is something Jeremy's going to explain. And when you think about capital purchases, we do think a lot of times about the police department and things like that. This is a unique purchase. A skid steer with a broom attachment. I'm not even going to try to explain this. Jeremy is going to. But what this is going to help with are all of the stormwater problems that we have. Maintaining our stormwater system, which is becoming an ever increasing operational cost on an annual basis. And some of the issues that were caused 15, 20, 30 years ago from new development that simply exist today that now we have to inherit and fix. And that's just part of it. We have to have the right equipment to do that. So rather than going into the stormwater fund that we use to complete projects to buy a piece of equipment that we need to complete those projects ourselves, this is a great opportunity to make a general revenue purchase with additional dollars that we would have had to take from somewhere else. And so I would have Jeremy explain the benefits of that to our stormwater improvement program. So with that, you can see that we're just under the $1.3 million target that we were talking about that Mary explained. Again, I don't want you to think that we're spending all the money in the bank because that is simply not the fact. But this was the number that I was comfortable with dealing with Mary that we had available to us that we can make some real big things happen and move forward. So I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to let Chief Arnold explain just what the Brick Street Plaza remodel is, as we are currently working with our engineers who have an architect department, and he's working with them as well as Samantha. So take it away, Chief.
All right, good morning. So if you guys remember back to the September board retreat, I focused on 3 priorities as an organization that we really need to address to be sustainable in our mission and how we operate as a public safety entity. And those were staffing, equipment, and facilities. So whenever the best opportunity we've had in the 16 years I've been at the city for the police department to make some improvements and address some of our needs. We knew instantly that we had to focus on those capital improvements. So we started looking at equipment and facility and what we could do with some of those funds. And so in 2017, 18, 19, 20, every year before we go into budget, we do a facility needs assessment of exactly what we need. We need about 15 offices every year, locker rooms, restrooms, showers, that comes up, break room, interview rooms, storage, on-site storage. Those are all things that come up. So we started talking with our architect about what we could do with this new additional space that we got in the church and how it could benefit the police department, but also the law department and the rest of the city by creating some additional much needed office space really for multiple departments throughout the city. So when we started talking about the remodel, the architecture estimate came in over 300,000. We've attributed to 400,000 to it just because we do believe there are a few things that are probably going to be a little bit higher than initially done or initially estimated, and also some of the things, how it will impact my current facility, and we will have to make some changes there. So we attributed 400,000 to it. What that will give us, what it will address first is office space. Currently, we have 9 offices, dedicated offices within the police department. However, some of those offices have up to 3 people in them. So you have a 12-foot by 12-foot office that I have 3 people working out of. They're literally stacked on top of each other. So with the proposed remodel, that will expand our office suites to 12 office suites, but it'll also give us some multi-use, multifunctional areas that we plan on turning into cubicle type office space. If any of you are used to an office setting whatsoever, you know what I'm talking about when we're talking about cubicle, private workspace for people, but we can utilize that multifunctional area much better that way. So with the proposed remodel that our architect has put forward, we will expand to 8 cubicle style offices as well in an area, which will definitely get us a lot further towards meeting what our actual needs are than where we're at right now. One of the key things is a bathroom and locker room area. Right now, my staff has no place to shower or change or, leave the clothes that they have on at work. They have no way of doing any of that. They have to go home. And that's a safety issue. It really is. I know you guys don't know exactly what we do, but there's a lot of stuff that my police officers come in contact with every day that I would not wish my family to be around at any time. And my police officers are having to take that type of stuff home because we do not have adequate facilities to even change out of our uniform, shower, properly sanitize and stuff like that. So a locker room area which provides our officers the ability of storing their uniforms here, showering after work. Last night, one of my officers got puked on. What do? They have to go home and clean up because a sink does not cut it when that happens. So that will be a huge benefit to us. Also a break room. Alderman Poston, Alderwoman Alder, Mayor Gardner, you all have been in my building numerous times. You've seen what our break room is currently. You can put one person in there barely to turn around, but there's just no way of giving my staff a place where they can even sit down to eat their lunch that's not at their workspace. So a dedicated break room for where my staff can take 30 minutes out of their day and eat lunch and stuff like that will be an addition. On-site storage, you guys probably don't know this, but we currently have 2 storage units in different places in the city where we have to store a lot of our gear that's not stored in a hallway or something like that. Because right now we have a little over 250 square feet of storage space inside our building. So the design would open up approximately 1,000 square feet of storage space within our facility. Interview rooms. Right now I have 1 interview room. Our need is 3 to 5 interview rooms. With the proposed design, we will have 3 interview rooms, and we'll also have a soft interview room, which will be utilized for victim and witness interviews. So they're not in a hard style interrogation room. They're in a more comfortable interview room where we can really focus on that victim-based investigation of serious and intimate crimes. Also open up a work area for my clerks. Right now I have 3 clerks in a very, very small confined space up front. By the proposed remodel, we'll be able to move one of those over to a different place and be able to have some social distancing that we have no way of doing it. So those are some of the things that it's going to do for the PD, but also part of the project is developing office space in that church area for use for the legal department as well as for other departments within the city. So there will be office space, multifunctional workspace, and things like that where different staff throughout the city can really benefit. And so it's not really just for the police department, the entire city, multiple departments really do benefit from this potential expansion. And finally, if there is money, I would like to look at, giving a facelift to the exterior of our building. It may just be, pressure wash and some of that. I don't know. It kind of depends on where we fall in with the money at the end of it. But I do truly believe that a facelift is in store. I think addressing this also will help us, address our other big need, and that's staffing. Routinely, we have people who come in and apply for a job at the Ozark Police Department, and as soon as they walk in the building, they pretty much withdraw their consideration for trying to work for us because we do have one of the poorest public safety facilities in Southwest Missouri. And so I really do think that this can benefit that other much needed priority for us of staffing as well.
Yeah, just any questions on this?
Yeah, do you guys have any questions on the Brick Street Plaza? We have some architectural drawings already. And so I did present this proposal to the CARES committee. However, it was in November. And at that time, the money was running a little bit tight. And it did not get selected as a project. However, it was right on the cutoff line of what was selected and what was not. Ultimately, it just came down to a timing thing. Mr. Smith?
You're muted, Ted.
Ted, you're muted.
I know. I apologize.
One of these days, you're going to learn how to use Zoom, Ted.
Yeah. Okay. Steve, Chief, Mariana, I don't disagree with anything that any of you have said about the need and the so forth, so forth. The only thing I'm going to say is big picture, Steve. Big picture, we need to get back to a comprehensive plan overall for everything. That's not to hold up what Chief just went through on Brick Street. It's not to say, no, don't do that. But big picture, we need to be getting back to comprehensive plans overall for what the city's facilities are going to be. And I know money's tight. I know that's a hard challenge, but we need to do it. We need to do it because we've got a lot of problems. We've got a lot of issues with the buildings. And I'm still a firm believer that if we could figure that out and get over the hump, it would actually be cost savings overall long-term than what we're doing now. So again, I agree with you, Chief. Everything you said, we need to do it. We need to do it. We need to take care of you guys and ladies. But just big picture, let's not lose sight that in big picture, the facilities of Ozark overall, we need a comprehensive plan. We need to get back to that at some point when it's appropriate.
I don't disagree. I don't think we ever, I think we're constantly looking at our comprehensive plan. I think we're constantly trying to move the ball forward on trying to find a way to fund new facilities. I think that, you know, we tried to do that in the use tax, and I think we all agree with you, but the likelihood of that happening in the near future is just, I guess we just don't see that being the case. I mean, without tripling our property tax levy, or without even the use tax, if the use tax created $500,000 a year, if you built if you had $10 million and on a 20-year fixed loan at 3.5%, your monthly payment's $60,000. So when you look at what that annual payment is at $60,000 a month for spending $10 million for new facilities, you got to have a pretty big new revenue source to be able to do that. And I don't know where that's going to come from. So absolutely, we'll always keep the comprehensive plan there. Facility improvements will always be on there. But until we figure out what that revenue source is going to be and the magnitude for which it can deliver, I think this is where we're at the moment.
And and Steve, you bring up another good point. I don't want to get off topic, but we need to get back to the use tax. I know it's unpopular. I know the third time is not necessarily what people want to hear, but big picture again, it is vitally, vitally, vitally important for the survival of Ozark that either the legislature in Missouri solves that problem for us, or we solve it for ourselves and get it back on the ballot and get it passed. It is vitally important. So anyway, that's not off topic. I don't want to get into that, but you said the word, so I wanted to echo it.
I can tell you that the state of Missouri and the legislature has absolutely no desire or appetite to solve that problem for us. The bills that are being considered that have the most traction are actually going to make it harder for cities to get this passed. I mean, and I'm not trying to be the downer. I'm just telling you which bills have traction in the House and the Senate right now. And unfortunately, the state's not going to be a help. So we're kind of on our own.
Mr. Galloway, Bruce?
Yes, I just echo that. I think one of the problems that we'll be facing will be the loss of revenue without a use tax because we'll lose a source of funds that I think Mary Edna had estimated to be around 250,000. She can correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I asked that question, maybe more, maybe less. A couple comments on the building. Would be very interested, Chief, to review the architectural plans. I'm just curious, not going to add any of my input, but I'd just like to see it. And maybe that could be sent to other alder people as well. The improvements to the Ozark Police Department, lest anybody watching our meeting think that we've just come into largesse. I mean, we just didn't have the money to do them, and these were long overdue. A single interview room for this size population just doesn't cut it. Law enforcement has to be effective, and these improvements is not just with the interview rooms, of course, but that's the part that I am most familiar with. They're very, very important to police operations and very important to solving crime. It's a shame that we didn't have the funding to do this earlier. And of course, the other amenities. Chief, I did have a question on police equipment. I recall, and I may have asked this, that we had applied for a grant for license plate readers so we can see if we have criminals or thieves driving around our community, people with warrants. What was this? What happened with the grant application? Did it get approved or shunted or?
So we applied. We did not get approved. However, I don't know that anyone got approved because when we did that, it was right during the really the onset of COVID-19, and a lot of those grants just kind of dissipated, for lack of better terms. But I do know that we did not get approved for the LPR. I have been in talks with a few private companies of how we may be able to find a solution for that. But again, it comes down to dollars on that, and they're not the most affordable solution, or the most affordable equipment out there. There are a few opportunities that we may have to partner with some homeowners associations and things like that, or business districts. However, to be perfectly honest, once that grant application kind of failed, LPRs kind of taken a little bit of a backseat to some other items that are much more critical for us to perform our basic functions.
Yeah, that's the story, isn't it? Always a resource issue in our city.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Poston.
Hey, Chief, I've got a couple questions for you. One, if you can kind of look into your crystal ball here, how long does this upgrade buy us?
This upgrade will meet our needs right now. And it will not completely meet our needs. I will still have offices that I have multiple people in. I still won't have a training room. I still don't have, we're working with a 1940s building that you can only do so much with. In 10 years, this building will not meet our needs.
But does it buy us 10 years?
But like we're doing now, this will buy us 10 years. In 10 years, I will be telling you, I have 3 people in a 12-foot by 12-foot office. I have no solution for storage any longer on site. However, it will meet our needs right now. And, with ingenuity, we will be able to buy some time into the future, probably 10 years.
Okay. And then the second one was, you had mentioned a few times before the purchase of a side-by-side.
Yep.
I also kind of wondering, with, is that going to be one of your items in here? Oh, no. Okay.
No. So we actually budgeted for a side-by-side this year. I have it ordered. It should arrive within 4 weeks. So this spring, you should start seeing Ozark police officers patrolling the trail, the park, Garrison Springs, places like that on a fully equipped OPD UTV.
Good. I brought that up because my guess is that as we emerge from this freeze, that you're going to have a lot of people looking to get outside. I expect the parks and whatnot to be pretty busy. I think charities will get back to doing their events. So I wanted you to be ready for that this summer and spring.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're very excited about that. That'll be a resource that we use, especially as our parks and trail system continues to grow. That will definitely be a resource that we use a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Heather.
Oh,
Heather?
Yeah, do we know how much more we owe on the building?
Hey, RJ, that's an excellent question, and I just texted that information to Mary. She's looking at it right now. So I'll get back to you on what do we still owe on it, how many years that is, what's our annual payment, because clearly if it's in a rational realm, Mary and I will go back to the budget and we'll do all that we can to say, well, maybe it makes as much sense or more sense than it even does already to make these improvements, even if we can go ahead and make the payment and pay off the building. So let me find that out and I'll get back to you on that.
There's one thing we might consider on this, and this is just throwing this out there, but if it's something where we're able to pay off what we have left on the note for the building, we might be able to get these improvements done by refinancing part of it or something like that. And that might actually help us. I don't know what interest rates are right now and I don't know how that works necessarily with our city, but from a business standpoint, it might be a better thing to pay off the asset, figure out a way to finance these things and maybe even get ourselves further ahead really with the same amount of money. Just something to take into consideration and maybe look into as an option.
It's a great point, and I will absolutely bring back to you the information about what a refinance would look like, and how much cash out, as they call it, would be available to make that happen, and try to stay within the same realm of the payments or something. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, we might be able to take the same amount of money and make it go a lot further for us, and maybe get a little further ahead with that.
Okay, we'll look at that.
Heather, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was wondering if this amount of money utilizes everything that you could do to this building, or if you had more money, could you make it work even better and make it last longer than 10 years? Or is this about the best we could do?
I think this truly is about the best we can do just because of the space constraints. Sam and I, Mr. Childers, we've been back and forth with the architect numerous times trying to completely maximize the space, not only for the police department, but also the legal department and other departments within the city. And the last plan that we got, a consensus between all of us is that it truly does maximize the space to its fullest potential. So I really don't think there's a whole lot more we can do.
So on hearing that too, it means that this building you think is going to last 10 years and that's about it. There's no more we could do to this building?
I want to answer that. I think the actual, like I said, if worst case scenario, if we don't find a new mechanism, new revenue source to be able to build new facilities like a city our size needs, then I'm looking at our current facilities saying, how can we maximize the benefit of those? I think your real next move would be if we end up securing the property that we've talked about called the Birdhead property behind Fasco. That would probably be the next big transition to move Public Works out of the end of the Brick Street building and free up all that space and take Public Works and build a new facility out behind Fasco. What that does is that opens up Brick Street. So if you have to stay in Brick Street, and if the Brick Street Plaza does remain our public safety building, now you've opened up a much larger area in that, few thousand square feet, actually. You move Public Works out, they go somewhere else, and you just keep using the Brick Street Plaza as your public safety building. Heather, that's about the best plan we got right now.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I think that's all.
Oh, here you go.
Check everybody.
All right, so public safety equipment is the second item that we talked about. In 2019, when I took over as interim chief, one of my main focuses was a vehicle maintenance plan to ensure that we are maximizing the life of our vehicles, but also not having dangerous vehicles, emergency response vehicles out on the roadway. In August of 2019, 50% of our patrol fleet had over 100,000 miles on it. That's like a civilian car having about 400,000 miles on it. And this is, men and women running lights and sirens down the road, at high speed. So we focused on reducing the number of vehicles that we had that were over 100,000 miles through our maintenance program. Right now, we set at under 30% of our vehicles have over 100,000 miles. In June, with the vehicles that we budgeted this year through our capital improvements, we'll have an additional 5 patrol vehicles, which will get us to all of our patrol fleet being under 100,000 miles. However, This was a little bit of a different year. We budgeted for more vehicles than we typically do. So one of the proposals I would like to make is utilizing some of this money to purchase 2 more patrol vehicles, which will lighten the load for us when we're looking at 2022, 2023 budgeting cycles as to how many patrol vehicles we'll need to buy. Currently, to get ourselves in a better position, because we were very, very far behind and in poor condition in August of 2019, our fleet. We've been purchasing used Missouri State Highway Patrol vehicles, which those vehicles come to us. They have approximately 50,000 miles on them, and they have about 2 years of warranty left. So we really have 2 options. We can either go back to the Highway Patrol and buy 2 used Ford Explorer SUVs, which will cost us about $70,000 after we upfit them, or we can purchase 2 brand new Ford Explorers off the state bid. Here's the difference. The Highway Patrol vehicles have a 2 to 3 year shelf life for us before we will phase them out. And they have either 50,000 miles or 2 years of warranty left in them. The brand new vehicles, they have a 5 to 6 year shelf life for us, and they have a 5-year warranty that comes with them. I truly believe we've made the right decisions here over the last 2 years, going with the used Highway Patrol vehicles to help reduce that overall mileage within our fleet. However, this is a very good opportunity for us to purchase 2 new vehicles and really get ahead for that 5 to 6 year rather than that 2 to 3 year mark that the used vehicles get us.
Do these prices include outfitting
Yeah.
the vehicle?
Sorry. So these prices, the 70,000 for the 2 used or the 95,000 for the 2 brand new, those will be out the door, ready to go on the street. That includes the upfit. There will be some reused equipment. I think Alderman Poston asked a little bit about that the other night with our contract. We do everything we can to reuse the equipment that goes in these vehicles. But yeah, these prices will be what it costs us to put them on the street right now. Ideally, some of the other departments in the city can then start benefiting from some of our surplus vehicles. Once they hit 100,000 miles, they may be a really good vehicle for a different department in the city to utilize because they're not running emergency responses and things like that. But ultimately, it puts us in a very, very good position for years to come to budget for our vehicles by being able to add these right now. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Can you go to the next one?
Oh, yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, if they both come outfitted, option A and option B, the 95,000 for the 2 new ones would be, obviously the better route of the 2, just because, I mean, you're looking at a $25,000 difference and getting a whole lot more longevity out of those 2 vehicles than you are going with a used one. So if we had the 2 options to choose from, I definitely would think B would be the right one. That's all I wanted to say about that.
And I agree. The vehicles that we purchase from the Highway Patrol, they have a very, very good fleet management program. However, we may be inheriting a problem that no one knows about when we get it. Luckily, we haven't had that, but I have talked to other chiefs who've ran into that issue where they have a vehicle for 5,000 miles and all of a sudden they have a big problem. And so I agree with you that going new this time does make sense for sure. Any other questions?
Go to the next one.
Sorry, we have 3 rows of people and we can't see them all.
Okay. All right, second, or actually third and fourth, would be the purchase of 25 new mobile data terminals for MDTs. MDTs are the in-car computer. They are basically the nerve center of everything that my officers do. If you all remember, we partnered with 911 and all the other public safety entities in the county last year to get an upgraded computer-aided dispatch. And now our MDTs are in need of being updated. Right now, we have a rotation or a life cycle on our MDTs where we cycle them out every 3 to 4 years. However, by upgrading all of them right now, it will put us in a much more efficient and effective position to utilize our CAD to its fullest potential. That improves time management for officers through efficiency, effectiveness, officer safety. There are things that at the end of the life cycle of our MDTs, they have some significant issues. For instance, the touch screens go out, the lighted keyboards. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you work nights, having a lighted keyboard is a must. You know, power cords, we're constantly buying power cords because these MDTs do take a beating. Most of the time you do see them in our cars. However, oftentimes our officers will pull them out, take them in and work on them inside because that is the nerve center of pretty much all the work that they do. And so the 25 new mobile data terminals, it would again be another strategic move to put us in a position to where we can definitely maintain that equipment and those resources through the life cycle. And the final proposal that I have is to upgrade our patrol fleet with mobile ticketing machines. This obviously is a huge benefit to the police department, but it's also a very, very big benefit to the legal department. I won't speak on behalf of Ms. Calloway, but I know that just the idea of this happening will put a smile on her and her staff's face. This is something that a police department our size should have had for a considerable amount of time. However, pricing on it historically has made it not a reality with the other resources that are more prominent in our hierarchy of needs. But to equip the entire fleet with mobile ticketing machines would be about $24,000. This does come with an annual maintenance cost of about $12,000 in years to come. However, I'm very confident that I can find room in my budget to make that happen. A couple of things that the mobile ticketing machines will address. Efficiency is one of the big things. With this, my officers will be able to simply scan a license, a driver's license through the machine. It will extract the data that it needs. And then if my officers decide to issue a summons, then it will automatically print that out. That data from the ticket will automatically be uploaded to the legal department. So not only is it benefiting us, it's a streamless way of us sharing that data and that information with the legal department. It's also a much better way for us to stay compliant with the Missouri Attorney General's racial profiling guidelines. The software that goes along with this will allow us to compile that data that right now my officers manually enter, and monthly we're having to go back in and look at that raw data and pull that raw data. With this option, we rely on the software that comes with this technology to do that for us. It's not a thing about generating citations or anything like that. Right now, my staff writes about 15% of all traffic stops with citations. However, this is a technology that will help us with some of the data collection that we need, and also it will streamline the interface between us and the legal department, where we're not having to hand deliver hard copies of citations and things of that. Does anyone have any questions regarding the MDTs, mobile data terminals, or the mobile ticketing machines?
I think on the mobile data terminals, or will we be replacing all of them, even the ones that aren't that very old, or are we just replacing the oldest ones, or because really the only reason why I'm asking is because if we have to replace them every 3 years or so, and we've got some that aren't that old, we might be creating another problem for us in 3 years or so whenever they're all outdated and we've got to update them all again. But it's just a question.
Right, so I don't know the exact number that we have, but we have a little over 30 MDTs right now. Typically we replace them every 3 years. So we have about 10 that are the newest generation right now. And then we have 20 or a little more that are older generations. By purchasing 25, we will have then 25 that are the newest generation that we can deploy in the field with that additional 10, because not only do my patrol officers have these, but my detectives have them and things like that. So we will maybe be 1 year ahead in that life cycle than what we typically are with the 25, but typically we have somewhere between 11 and 13 of each year, if that makes sense. So basically we're doubling up. We're taking 2 years and putting us in a position to where as we expand, because I have openings and stuff like that, I think that we're putting us in a position to where we can continue to stay in that pattern, have the extra resources we need, because these things, they break down and they're put off the road. Or for instance, when I have field training officers in a car, I have 2 MDTs going in a car simultaneously. And right now, a lot of those that we use for that are very, very old. So we'll be able to replace some of those extras and things like that we do utilize. And I think we can stay right into that 3 to 4 year cycle. And it really doesn't give us a whole lot of extra, if that makes sense. All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on if there's not any more questions. The only thing I'll say about the last presentation is please note that the remodel of the Brick Street building also gives us a great improvement to our municipal court setup and our legal department. Right now, the legal department is completely separate from the municipal court. There's no connection at all from the records and the usability of that. This is going to put the legal department offices right next to the municipal court, provide a connection, an interior connection, so you don't have to go outside, go around and get into the municipal court. So this would be a great advance for our whole legal department in the municipal court situation too, which also gives a greater benefit to the citizen staff interaction and additional bathroom facilities for our legal department. Once again, from a social distancing CARES Act standpoint, you want to be able to create a situation where your different departments have access to those types of things, to where you're not sharing all of that all the time, and you're also separating the staff from the general public. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So we're going to move on to the next item, which is Garrison Springs. Sam?
Sorry, I'm like real close here. Sorry, guys. I will step back. So this is the cost of Garrison Springs. We made her an offer. She countered an offer, and then we accepted her offer. So the purchase price was $380. The MDC, which is the state grant, will reimburse as soon as the property is closed on. That will be the $131,750 that Steve talked about earlier. The federal reimbursement will not disperse to us until she's moved out of the facility and the property is used for what it's supposed to be, which is an educational center. So until that happens, they will not disperse the federal funds, and that will be next March. So that'll be in the 2022 budget. So the city contribution for just the property real estate itself was the $65,250. And then you can see these kind of soft costs, which is just some cost for closing, security upgrades, a security gate. We are required to do a forestry plan, and we went out to bid for that, and that came in at $8,000. And then we just got some miscellaneous costs that we need to take care of for some like compliance and just things that we have to do down there. So the total cost of the city is going to be somewhere around 117, 120, somewhere right in that area. So sorry guys, there's only one row of you. So if you have a question, you'll have to give me a sec or say something. Okay. No questions on Heather? You're still muted, Heather.
Okay, sorry. Does that cover redoing this bridge?
No.
Okay, refresh my memory on how we're going to do that, or if that is necessary. Is that correct?
At some point, yes, we will have to cover the bridge. And it's
But-
100,000.
Is what, pardon me?
100,000.
Okay, but it's not necessary in the beginning.
We need to get it done, and we're doing some fundraising to hopefully cover some of those costs. So if you want to be a part of that, you are more than welcome to. We are taking donations from Heather Hills Park, so just so you know.
Sure, we can build a bridge, yeah.
We'll name that bridge after you, Heather. It could be Heather's
Well,
Bridge.
thank you, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's just such a big cost item that I think that we can get in there and get this done. So yeah, the bridge is another one of those things. But before we start allowing like heavy public use or heavy public access, that's when we'll probably need to do the bridge. So, but we're still looking at those options, like Sam said.
Okay, any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Okay, the inclusive playground. We've talked about this before. We've got CC Links is who we're working with for this. They had kind of started talking to Nixa, and they've done some fundraising for years and years. So they've got about 75,000 that they said they don't dedicate to this project. We are still doing tons of fundraising. The Parks Department, my maintenance guys have decided that they want to have a fishing tournament. So we've got that coming up in May. So we've gotten a couple of grants, and then we're just still working forward, trying to get as much fundraising as we possibly can. The project cost is going to be somewhere between $235 and $250. And I mean, obviously it could go higher than that or lower than that, just depending on what it is, but it's going to fall somewhere inside of that project. So that dedicated $150 is going to make a huge difference towards that project. Once we, there's they kind of call it a match grant that's out there, where usually in the fall, they will offer like 50% off or a match for playground equipment. So we're going to try and really utilize these dollars to get as much as possible. So I'm hoping that this project will actually be somewhere around the 500 mark, but we will be the dedicated 250 to it. So don't think that just because it's not like built tomorrow, if this is funded, that it's not, because we're really trying to utilize it as much as possible. So this is something we need desperately bad. If approved, it will make a huge difference to a lot of people in all of Christian County, because we will be the only inclusive playground in the area. Nathan.
So there was a couple items. I think one was a bathhouse. Is that right? Some restrooms by this park that were going to be separate from, what we had at the pool.
Yep.
Is that part of this, or is that 250 just the playground itself?
So every year I always budget for a bathroom up there, and then like last year it got taken out because of COVID, so we had to save the funding for it. So there is some money already in the parks budget for projects like that. It'll just depend. So no, it's not in there, but yes, it's kind of already in the budget. So if we can move forward and things kind of get back on track, and we'll be able to take that hopefully out of what we've got in our parks already budgeted for that thing.
Do you remember what that number was, Sam, that it was going to take to build it?
I think it's 30,000, if I remember. I think it was like 28,000 to build a bathroom up there.
Okay. And then what about, is there going to be any like seating, benches, anything else up around here? Or is there already enough in that area to cover what we need?
We've kind of, okay, so we had a landscape architect do this design for it, and then we've been working with playground equipment. So we're gonna have to kind of combine it all into one effort, and then it'll help me understand a little bit better on how it will work in terms of like the layout and all of that. It's just without having funding for it, we were just sort of shooting for the stars. And then when this opportunity came available, then we can move to that next step and hopefully figure that out. But a lot of it will come down to, like, we just have a little bit of money in the parks budget, and then we'll just keep going for grants and see what we can get. We're trying to build it to where you can just keep adding to it and leaving room for more stuff, like as we get more funding, but get that like base layer down for it.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Jeremy, are you there? Want to talk about this fancy thing?
I am. Yeah, I'm here. All right, you ready for me to take over?
Go for it.
All right. here we go. I just kind of wanted to start by explaining really briefly our stormwater funds and how we utilize those. As you know, that is a sales tax that is accompanied by the park and stormwater. So we get a percentage of that, and John did a really good presentation of breaking down how we utilize those funds. But what we've been doing over the last few years is we've taken on these huge cost share projects from MoDOT, which is great. Everybody loves those projects. That's wonderful. But we've been able to use that stormwater money for the cost share because streets and storm run hand in hand. And streets and storm are the budgets that we struggle with the most. It's just limited on what we have to do there. Now, thankfully, we've got the transportation sales tax in place for now, and I hope that we get to renew that. But we are always looking for ways to layer different funds to basically extend the amount of improvements that we can make. It comes down to we're trying to get more bang for our buck. So when we looked at this, and Steve had talked about this possible amendment and what was what we could possibly do with it, stormwater popped to the front of our minds. Every spring, if you come into my office, you'll see a map right next to me that shows all these call-outs. Right now, there's 16 call-outs on there that show stormwater issues. Some of these are not regional issues. These are smaller issues where we're having some erosion, where we're having water over top the streets, things of that nature. So what we do and what we've continued to do is we try to self-perform as many of these jobs as possible. With our training and certifications, we've got more people qualified to run this equipment. And we've just done a good job of knocking these off. That's not to say that there's several more out there, and I will tell you this, stormwater is like dandelions. When it starts raining, they start growing. I mean, it just pops up all over the place. So when Steve came to me about this, I immediately thought of our street conditions. I've had street conditions on my mind quite a bit lately. Maybe that's why I thought of it. But what we're trying to do here is stick within what it's called our MS4 limits. And that goal is to keep our streets as clean as possible, the debris removed, stay in compliance with DNR, and then that allows our stormwater management system to function more efficiently. It allows it to carry the water it was designed to carry. And I'm not saying that this one machine is going to fix all the stormwater problems. Well, next to this map is another map that shows 7 regional problems that we have in the area that are going to take engineering, contracting. Those are things that we've just identified. But what this piece of machinery does, it helps us stay in compliance with MS4. It helps us keep the streets clean, keep the debris off, keep the stormwater flowing. The big reason this piece of equipment is so critical is that, yeah, it can do all that, but it can also be a very versatile piece of machinery for the rest of the fleet. They've got these skid steers to where you can have multiple attachments on there. So this will help us with our trail maintenance. It'll help us when we're building fence. We can put an auger on the end of it. It'll help us with street projects. We can put a grinder on it. The point is, this is a very versatile piece of equipment that could potentially replace a Bobcat that we got back in 2008. That is now, it's ready after 13, almost 14 years of work, and we're ready to put that on gov deals and potentially sell that. So that's it in a nutshell. I wanted you to see the benefit from the stormwater side, which is one of our limited revenue streams, but I also want you to know that this piece will be used on multiple projects throughout the city. So it is a very versatile piece of equipment, and it will just make our fleet that much stronger. And I want to say this too, we've come a long ways with our fleet, and we appreciate the investment that we've made into this in Public Works, and this will make us that much stronger, and it'll make us that much more efficient. So
Jeremy, let me ask you a question. I imagine a lot of us understand what MS4 is, but if there are people on the call that don't know what that is, would you go into more detail, please? I know it's stormwater management, but explain
Yeah.
in detail why this is going to help.
Yeah, so MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. That's a tough one. That's why everybody calls it MS4. But basically what this is, it's a way that DNR takes a look at our stormwater and the amount of erosion, pollution, things that make it into our local riparian corridors, streams, what have you. We have an MS4 permit that covers our entire city. And then as people develop in our city, they have to work underneath our permit. So what that means is, A, we're in charge of the entire city when it comes to stormwater control and erosion control. But B, it also means that we are the ones that lead by example. When we go out there and tell developers they've got to control their erosion, it's never a fun conversation for them to say, oh yeah, well look at your streets over here. You know, you got leaves, you got debris, you've got all these things. But I guess the long and short of it is, Mr. Mayor, is that it's the permit that we operate from underneath the Department of Natural Resources to make sure that our streams, riparian corridors, and everything are as clean and pollution-free as possible.
All right, and this piece of equipment just helps us do that. Okay, Mr. Poston and then Mr. Flores.
Hey, Jeremy, just to clarify, we're buying a skid steer and a broom attachment, right? This is not a single piece of equipment. We can swap out that broom with any other bucket or blade or whatever we need, right?
Absolutely. That's what I hope everyone understands. This is a completely versatile machine. I mean, they have got attachments beyond attachments for these things. We're focusing on the broom because of the MS4, but Nathan, we can use this thing for so many different projects.
You said they had a Bobcat you were getting rid of, right?
Yes.
Will any of the attachments for the Bobcat work with the John Deere you're showing, or the apples and oranges?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not for sure that we're going to get a John Deere, but what I can tell you is that whatever we spec and whatever we get, we will make sure that it's compatible with all the tools that we've currently got in our arsenal for the skid steer.
Okay.
They have made these things to where they're really universal and they can be used on multiple projects.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Flores.
Sir.
The only thing I was wondering about, Jeremy, and I'm sure you guys probably thought about it, but I know skid steers, I was going to say skid, they're really rough on blacktop. You know, and the only thing I'd be concerned about is by trying to clear away stormwater, we're damaging our roads. Is this, and the tracks probably are a little bit better than the wheels, but have you guys thought about that at all as far as how hard this thing is to drive on blacktop and turn?
Yeah, and you're right, RJ, they've come a long ways though with the tracks and the ability to get on and off the roads without doing any damage. Those rubber tracks essentially are very street friendly, almost even more so than the old tires that we used to use on the Bobcats that you've seen for years. They just got more give to them, more flexibility to them, and we don't see a lot of street damage. In a perfect world, RJ, if you came to me and said, how are you gonna do the best possible job to clean these streets? And this is something that we'll have to look at in the future. But right now we have a very small street sweeper that was basically designed for parking lots, one like you would see at a Walmart or something like that. That piece of machinery is great when it works, but it rarely works. In the future, we're going to have to look at possibly getting a street sweeper, more of an industrial one. But in the meantime, we can keep up with everything. And then back to the versatility of this piece of machinery. We'll be able to keep up with stormwater, and we'll be able to utilize it on projects from sewer, water, parks, all that. So, but I do think that they've come a long ways with the tracks on those, RJ.
All right. Any other comments on the skid steer. I believe that was the last part, Samantha, of the budget amendment. Okay, Steve had to leave this meeting and jump on a Zoom call with the Finley Farms TDD, which I think is coming up at 10 o'clock. So he had to leave, so that is why he is not here. But we'll bring forth budget amendments for legislative approval later. This was just for discussion this morning. So if there are no other questions about these.
Rick, I've got one just real quick.
Go right ahead.
I just wanted to throw something out there. I was glad to see that we were trying to tackle some projects that had been mentioned with the use tax proposal. If the numbers turn out to be right, and you know, I know that Mary Edna is always a little conservative on our estimates, and we have a little bit more towards the end of the year. I would like to throw the animal shelter up as a potential candidate, since that was also one of the projects that we had listed on that use tax, and which will likely never happen unless we get an influx like this to do it with. So just wanted to put that out there as a possible candidate down the road if things continue to look positive.
Yeah, Nick, we had discussed that, and we've got kind of a running list to see like top priority wise. So it's on the list, Nathan.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. If there's no other discussion on the proposed budget amendments, we'll bring those up for a formal amendment at an upcoming meeting and move on to the Ozark Center TDD discussion. Let me explain why we're doing that this morning. Of course, we had the public hearing Tuesday night, and you know, hopefully most everything was discussed to everybody's satisfaction. But Steve and Samantha and I just kind of felt that maybe there were still some questions, and just as a result of the discussion Tuesday night. You know, we've discussed that at length on several occasions, and we want to make sure that everybody understands what the idea is going forward and how that will benefit the city. But you know, there's no need to discuss that this morning unless there are questions or something that we can explain further. So
I have a question, if you don't mind, sir.
No, I don't. Let me make a comment that Steve specifically asked me to make before we got into the discussion. Now, not to cut you off, Nathan, but I don't know what your question is, so this may be it. Steve mentioned Tuesday night that there was a traffic study that's already been done for that south area. That is not true. The traffic study will be part of the TDD and will be funded by the TDD, but there has been a scope of work that has been outlined, and so that is not a full traffic study. So we have an idea of the projects that the city wants to include in that, but it's not as a result of a already completed traffic study. So having said that, Mr. Poston, what is your question?
Well, my question and concern, excuse me, is the residential piece of this. I find that unusual. You know, we often build commercial this way, or say often, but commercial, this can be done to flesh out commercial, a large commercial project, but now we're adding this residential component, and it's paid out of Fund A, which is funded at 70%, which means that subdivision and the connector of 19th from Tennyson down to that subdivision will be the first projects funded. And then this other massive list of things, including the study and everything else identified by the study, will get funded afterwards. So, and I'm putting this out there in as practical terms as I can. So a developer will be hired to build these streets. They're going to front that cash. They're going to build those residential streets. Then they're going to sell the lots and recoup their costs, as well as make a little profit, as they should. Then out of Fund A, we're going to reimburse the cost of those streets that have already been, whose expense has already been recouped through the sale of the lot. So whatever the cost of those streets are, $1 million, the developer is going to get an additional $1 million on top of having recouped their cost. And then once all that's taken care of, then we're going to work on projects that benefit everybody. The repaving of all the streets that are over there, the realignment of 15th Street to 19th, et cetera, et cetera. Or sorry, 15th to 17th. That makes me uneasy to have this residential component like that. And it also makes me wonder that if that residential component is going to be in there, why were the funds not swapped so that the projects that the city needs done were funded at the 70% rate and this residential development funded at the 30%?
Okay. Well, let me try to explain that, because I have been part of this discussion with Jared for, well, since it came up. I think I can do it to your satisfaction. It is a very unusual approach to it. We understand that. It's almost unheard of that something like this would be used for basically a private development that would be a for-profit. But what we have here is an existing transportation development district that is about to pay off in 2022. If that pays off without any kind of projects to renew it, it will go away. There's no automatic renewal. It will go away. And so the developer came to us initially and proposed this, and they wanted to use 100% of it, which was pretty ridiculous. And we told them so. And so we ended up with if this was approved, 70-30. But now keep in mind, from the very beginning, we will still get 30%. From the beginning, they will get 70%, but they don't get all of it. So they'll get the majority, and it will definitely go for a private development that is a for-profit. Hang on, Mr. Stewart. And so that is unusual. But however, what that does is prolong this transportation development district, where they will get the majority of the benefit up front, and we will get a significant benefit in the backside of this. And with the projects that will be identified when a traffic study is actually done. And for those of you who may not remember, I can see the picture of that, the concept plan, as if it was just yesterday. But that street, now I believe that's 19th Street that goes between Lowe's and Walmart. I'm not okay.
Right.
It is 19th.
That's right.
All right. That the idea for the future project list is that would go all the way down and connect to Selmore Road. And we have talked, meaning the city, has talked for years, for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and it's come from this council. And many of you have been on the council during all of those discussions, that we need to develop the south end of town. Because the south end of town is where we have the sewer capacity, we have the most undeveloped land, and that's going to be the easiest part to develop. This is a plan that would allow us to do that, because we can't do it without certain road connections, and we don't have the money to build a road 19th all the way down to Selmore and buy the not the easements, the right of way. It would also, as I remember, allow for the connections that are already stubbed out in Oak Hill, which would increase, if you've ever tried to navigate Oak Hill, that big subdivision with only two points of ingress and egress, that would allow for, I think, 2 more. But it's the bottom line is the city would get the benefit on the back side of this, not the front side. And
so Rick, if you would speak to that, please, because I agree that there's a lot of benefit to the city, but it's been said, and you mentioned it again, that without this residential development, that the TDD would pay off, and that would be the end of it. Yet we're also listing out this laundry list of projects that we need to be done. So it sounds like we have plenty of projects for this TDD to fund without building a subdivision.
Well, okay, but we don't control the TDD. If they don't get some benefit from it, there's no reason for them to proceed. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but the TDD is owned by the developer. The city doesn't own that. We are just a board member. Okay, we have some say so, but we don't control it. And if they don't get a benefit, they can just let it go away, and then we will automatically be responsible for all the public infrastructure that's already in there. And part of this, there's a maintenance fund in there. So we're going to not refurbish, but make sure that the current infrastructure that's already in there, that's in the process of being paid for, very nearly being paid for, that can be maintained as well as the new stuff. So, I mean, it can just plain go away. That's all there is to it, and there won't be any future.
So it's your understanding then from the developer's perspective, they don't believe that the streets that we want to build or repair benefit them, but they believe that that subdivision does. And without that subdivision, that the team that runs the TDD doesn't see a benefit in the other items?
Well, I'm sure they see a benefit, but I don't know that they see a sufficient benefit to want to go ahead and do it.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing, because if they don't want to do it, it won't get done. And so we've had multiple talks with them. In fact, the whole Board of Aldermen, this is nothing new to you all. And so the reason it was put on the discussion tonight or this morning is but basically because of your comments, Nathan, Tuesday night, we felt that maybe you were unsettled about it. We have already done a lot of negotiation with them and feel that we've got a project worth going forward with, and we felt that the Board of Aldermen did as well. And so we want to make sure that that is still what you feel because of the benefit to the city. So,
well, just from my seat, I don't think I've changed a lot on this. I've kind of spoken out against this subdivision at every breakfast meeting we've had this presented. That seems like an oddity to me, that all these commercial streets and potential residential collectors being built don't benefit them unless they get an actual subdivision on their border. So I do have some issues with it, but I appreciate this discussion, and I'm glad for you. I'm thankful for you to clarify.
well, you know, surely they understand that all of these things would benefit them with or without a subdivision, because they own their real estate that they own within the TDD is certainly going to benefit, but they still have to go forward with this. And is there enough benefit for them to want to do that? This is a tremendous opportunity for them. There is no question about it. I mean, it's a win-win for them and a win-win for the city, because we wouldn't be able to fund these projects without it. And that's why we got a Board of Aldermen. We may have one person with a lot of questions, and I get it, and I want to answer as many as we can. But in the end, we're going to be faced with a decision here fairly quickly, and to enter into this extension with the TDD. And we've come a long ways, and certainly in their understanding and in staff's understanding, to come up with what we felt we might need to address a little bit further. So, I think Mr. Stewart had a question, and then Mr. Flores. Okay, I don't see you, Jim. There you go, Jim. You had your hand up several minutes ago, and then RJ.
Okay, so the Nathan's point about.
You're kind of not real clear. Your audio.
Hang on.
That's better.
Oh, okay. Nathan's point about that they're gonna develop a subdivision, make their profit, and then get a new profit from the maybe not.
We're struggling. I'm trying to understand you. I don't know if it's on our end or your end, but let's Sam. We need to do before he goes on, because
how's this?
Oh, that is much better.
Okay. So to Nathan's question about, okay, so the developer's going to, develop the subdivision, make a profit on the lots, and then get a new profit basically from the TDD. That's a maybe. That's not a for sure. You're assuming at that point that particular ground can be developed at a cost that is at today's market rates, that he can actually make a profit from it in the first place. There's a reason that land hasn't been developed so far. And in today's environment, I can tell you for an absolute fact, if there's a developable piece of ground that is easily developable, every developer on there is trying to do it right now. If it's not easily developable, they're putting it on the back burner. So I'm not saying 100% that that's the case with this one. I'm just saying that don't view that as a foregone conclusion that he's going to double end this thing somehow and make an outsized profit on it. He might. I can't say he won't. I don't know enough about the ground, that particular parcel, to say one way or the other. but I wouldn't assume that right from the get-go. The second thing, my initial point is, if the TDD ends, the city gets nothing. Period, end of story, we get nothing. There's no benefit to the city ever again whatsoever, because the only way it's coming back is if the board approves it again. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But at least in this scenario, the city gets a source of funding to improve and maintain those roads in that area and potentially make it better for additional development later down the road. I understand the thoughts, and I even when I saw the proposal for the first time at City Council the other night, I agree. It's like, ooh, a residential subdivision. That's okay. That's new to me, but I would not. I think we need to look at the overall cost benefit analysis. Okay, and the cost being, well, okay, we let a developer do a residential as opposed to a commercial subdivision. The benefit being the 30% that the city gets to help maintain those roads in that area, which we currently just flat don't really have outside of the transportation sales tax, which I'm assuming is pretty much spoken for. We've got all the projects we can handle with that already. So I would just say don't dismiss it out of hand just because of that one feature. I understand your thought process, and again, it gives me a little bit of pause to start with as well, but don't assume as well that he's automatically giving himself an outsized profit by us agreeing to do this. That's not necessarily the case. I don't have the information to say one way or another, but it's not an automatic given. That's all.
Okay, good point. Mr. Flores.
Not trying to completely echo that, but I think the thing that we have to remember is that, yeah, this is definitely going to help them, whether it offsets their costs of the development or whatever, but obviously they're not going to do a TDD if it doesn't benefit them in some way or another. So this is the way that that's going to benefit them. But if we let this go by and we don't get this, we don't get anything. We're just shooting ourselves in the foot. And we need these funds to improve our south area, to do our stuff. This is on our southern area, which is where we want to encourage development anyway. Really, like Rick said, it's a win-win for us. And we can't afford to not do this. I mean, we just can't afford as a city not to do this and have that money to go towards our improvements and things like that. I realize they benefit more off of it up front, and we benefit more and more as it goes on. But to simply let it go by and miss all of that revenue to help fund these projects, it would be a mistake. And that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, a couple more comments, just let me make basically from my position and from staff position is, and it concerns the south side development. Any improvements we make from 19th going south, whether they go east into Oak Hill or go all the way south to Selmore Road, that opens up a significant increase in traffic flow to that area. And we have already decided or determined, I think we all feel that because of the Ozark by the Numbers study that was done, is that we have an opportunity, and with the fee study that we've just done, we need to focus where it's appropriate on more dense developments. Okay, there is I think it's either 60 or 80 acres that is directly east of this project, which would be on the east side of 19th, that is zoned for R4. It may be R3, I'm not sure, R3 or R4, or a combination of both. And there are people showing interest in that because of the fee study. You know, we could create a traffic situation here, and particularly with the Stinger development, which was 200 plus acres, which is down, somewhere where that outlet would come out on Selmore Road. I don't really know exactly where that is, but we know that that would alleviate some traffic from that development. If they were just going to Walmart and Lowe's, would have to come up Selmore Road and then go west on South Street. So, in some cases, we're anticipating a problem down the road that this is going to could take care of. So, anyway, I'm unashamedly in favor of it because I think it's more benefit in the long run. But because of the discussion Tuesday night, and because we are going to be put in a position to follow up with the letter of intent and bringing you a proposal probably to proceed with this, we just felt that more discussion might be appropriate. So, okay, Sam, what is that? I can't see if there are any hands up. Or no, that's all right.
Bruce.
All right, Bruce, thank you. Mr. Galloway.
Yeah, I appreciate Nathan's hard questions here. And,
yes.
You know, you, as you say, that it sounds unusual. I mean, I don't negotiate TDDs very often. And so what you're saying is that this bargain is cut a bit differently from most others. But I think thanks to Nathan's questions, we're able to get good answers as to why, you know, this exception would be worth pursuing. There are several interests for the city that are at stake. And one is to encourage Southside development. Southside development, any Southside development, is an investment in our city. And that is 100%. That's because people who live there will tend to shop here and not in Springfield. It's just further away to travel. Getting the dirt moved south side, where we just really haven't seen a lot of developer interest, I think is also a positive in that it might draw further development. And then I know from the negotiations, I mean, it seems like the negotiations reached, you know, the completed point. It'd be very difficult for me sitting here as an alderman to review negotiations, and I don't even know how I would step in. I don't know how a committee would step in to try to improve it. So I recall though that Steve had set the bar pretty hard for the developer. I remember several meetings, you know, he really pushed hard and he updated to have the developer contribute more. So I'm satisfied that, you know, the city administration really tried to, or drove as best a bargain as they could with this developer. And then finally, one thing that the administration has proven itself over and over is being scrappy at finding funding where, you know, our tax dollars can't really do it, and it should be doing it. This sounds to me like an example of it. You know, our citizens are able to get improvements, not on the time frame that we would like, ideally, but they're able to get improvements that are needed and sorely needed. And the developer simply isn't invested in what our public wants so much as they are invested in turning a profit. And I haven't heard anybody say that turning a profit is a bad thing. So it sounds to me like the city drove a hard bargain, gained a development on the south side where we need to encourage it, and then also was able to come up as their usual pattern of finding money where there wasn't it. I think that I want to thank Nathan's for his questions because they caused us all to think it through more. But you know, my feedback would be that I'm very agreeable to what's proposed.
All right, Mr. Parsons, his camera doesn't work, but he has indicated by text message that he's got a comment. So we won't be able to see him, but Jeremy, would you please speak to this?
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to bring up that, and I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know if you all are able to see my screen.
Well,
let's see.
Samantha can make it work. There we go. Okay.
I'm going to try again here. Well, maybe it's just not going to do it.
What popped up for a minute?
What are you trying to share, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm having problems on my side too. I've got a cold office and a cold computer, but I just wanted to go back to a couple things because again, back to Nathan's point, and if I pulled up the map, you would see that basically what you have allowed us to do as a board of aldermen is go back to the developer and say, listen, we get it. We get that this property needs some incentives, if you will, to develop. And that's exactly what Mr. Stewart was saying. This property has some major stormwater issues. And again, streets are connected to stormwater. So always think of those kind of in conjunction with one another. So when they started costing out how they were going to manage the stormwater in that area, they understood that they couldn't make this pencil out from an ROI standpoint. So by extending this revenue stream, they have found a way to make this land developable and to make it work in terms of a profit. But Nathan, the conversations that we have had have bolstered and solidified us to go back to the developer and say, listen, you have got to expand your scope of work. Our Board of Aldermen is not going to approve this if they don't see a community benefit, and that's what you've allowed us to do. And in this case, that community benefit is a south side study that has us look not just at this area around 17th, 19th, and all of that. It has us expanding all the way over to Selmore. It shows connectivity on the south side like we've never had. And to Bruce's point, the south side is where we have wanted to focus some of these developments. So I understand concerns, but I also hope that everyone can see that we've tried to drive a hard bargain in a sense. I think scrappy is the appropriate word, to see a community benefit and to still make this land developable. So I hope that helps, and I wish I could share my map, but I just wanted to jump in there.
Okay, that's a very good point, Jeremy. Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, I mean, there's certainly no action to be taken today, but we just felt that it was a good idea to discuss this more, and I'm glad we did because there were some very, very good points made, and we have 100% attendance. So thank you very much for that. We will move on to agenda item number 3, dark sky ordinance revisions. Mr. Smith.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can kind of follow along with the presentation. You should have received in your packet some information regarding our draft ordinance and what staff has been working on and proposing to the commission or showing the commission as well. If you're not seeing the screen, just let me know. I'm trying to get it pulled up now. All right, are you guys able to see the screen?
Hang on a second, in the OC, we're working, okay. Yes.
All right, so currently where we are at with this, staff has been, like I said, working on a draft ordinance that should have came with several items that the city clerk Chandler had guys in the packet yesterday, I believe. We've also been looking at other other ordinances that are in place for other communities that have dark skies. There's just not a lot out there at the moment, and definitely not a lot in our area or our size of communities. We did look at some of the ordinances in Tucson. Springfield's got not what they call a dark sky ordinance, but it is a site lighting ordinance or criteria. And also the International Dark Sky Association, they provide what they call a model ordinance that any community can review and follow and kind of use as much as they want from that in drafting their own ordinance. We've also have worked with the third-party engineer to kind of give us some feedback on an ordinance and some research that they have done. And then in conjunction, we'll also work with SimCog, our kind of our outside source in helping staff look at some new ordinances for the city of Ozark. We also have a collaboration that we've been working on with the Truman State University. The professor there had given a presentation to the commission about kind of the results of the dark sky data that the meter reading data device that was on top of City Hall. We have now located that on top of the Ozark Center, the OC. With their IDA Sky Quality Meter Program, we're getting some pretty good results in the packet of stuff that was sent to you guys. There's some of that kind of that summary of results of what we're seeing. Ozark is not as bad as what some might have thought. But we're at that point that if we don't do something about our current situation, then it's only probably going to continue to get worse. But right now we're kind of right in the median of other communities and other comparable size communities. Like I said, we took the draft ordinance to the commission on the meeting in December. We got some comments back from the commission, had a great discussion. And then also the professor from Truman State University kind of gave a presentation to the commission of what the findings were in Ozark. One thing that no one seems to ever think about, what's surprising is Ozark will probably always have a natural glow in our area just because we are a bedroom to Springfield. The light that is cast from Springfield will always give some of the lightness that we are seeing in the results of our data findings. So not a lot we can do there other than being a supportive community and help working with our partners surrounding us to do our part in controlling some of the night light. The purpose of the ordinance, the purpose of this section of the ordinance is to regulate the placement and arrangement of all the on-site lighting as defined in the section. The regulations are in public health, safety, and welfare of the general public and to be honest, the wildlife. I mean, that is a big issue that you'll see in some of those documents that were provided. As there's a big concern right now with the wildlife and how they are impacted by the light levels in the evening times. Enable the fair and consistent enforcement of these regulations, control the spillover light or the light glare, and reduce the degradation of the night sky time, and then the light pollution. Encourage the lighting systems which conserve energy and cost. A lot of this will look at some of the LED type lighting or also the color of the lighting. I mean, some people kind of lose the thought of the lighting, the color, the warmth of the lighting. And a lot of times that amber color is maybe a better situation in some locations. Preserve the community character, and then provide for nighttime safety, utility, security, and productivity. One of the things about lighting, in some cases, and one of those packets gives you an example, sometimes too much light actually is more of a burden than not enough light. It creates so much of a glare and you lose kind of the resolution and what you can see beyond that light that creates these dark spots or these unsecure situations. The application that we're looking at for this ordinance, just to define the on-site lighting that would fall under this ordinance, is all lighting that is not owned, installed, or maintained by a public utility that is also located on properties that are not primarily a single-family residential use or a two-family residential use. So we specifically have excluded single and two-family residential uses, mainly because those are platted individual lots. We didn't want to get into regulating someone's private personal residential use in their property at this time. However, we are looking at thinking more down the road of a multifamily. And the reason why we look at multifamily, because in a lot of cases, they have large parking lots that aren't platted individual lots. They're more of a larger lot that serves to support all of the residents in like an apartment complex or a 4 or 5-plex complex. And in addition to those common areas. So in a summary, pretty much this would cover all common type areas of a neighborhood of a subdivision, a pool house, a clubhouse, and then of course all the commercial, industrial, office, warehousing zone properties, and then a multi-family type zoning of a R3 and R4 where there's a parking lot. Parking lots do tend to cast a lot of light off of those and spill over on neighboring property lots. The ordinance clarifies kind of items as you read through that ordinance. It'll clarify the fixture cutoff and shielding, what that is and what that means. The light types, what kind of light levels that are allowed, what kind of the height of the light, and so forth. The foot candles were a measurement of determining the appropriate or allowed levels of light on a given point on the ground, basically. And then the light spillover onto neighboring properties. It identifies the lighting criteria and acceptable levels. It addresses the existing lighting, and there were concerns brought up about existing lighting and conditions that would not comply to this ordinance and how those are treated. And just for a summary of that, or conceptually thinking about that, if it's a maintenance and replacement of those lights, this ordinance would not apply to those. It's more of new lighting installed, or if they are basically taking all the lights out of their existing facility, parking lot, if you will, and replacing those with new lights, then of course, this ordinance would come into play. It notes the submittal requirements and a review and approval. So with this new ordinance, it would require some additional submittals that would have to come in for staff review or our third-party review, however it may be necessary. As far as permitting and requirements of those, if it's part of a major project, there's no new or additional permitting. It would just fall under that general permit. But like any other, if it's just a lighting plan submittal, in that case, we have what we call trays, like electrical permit. So it would require that same type of permit for electrical permit, which would already be required if they're doing any other kind of electrical work on a site. So in summary of that, I mean, there are no additional permittings that are required on this. That's not already in place in our current ordinances. It notes or identifies the exemption. So in the ordinance, we do identify some things that are exempt, that in a situation if falling under those, they would not be required to fall under this ordinance criteria. This next slide, I just want to give you guys an example of what a photometric plan or what we'd be looking at in addition to the submittal for approval. Generally, this is a conceptual type plan, but it does give you a lot of information. These can be prepared by a light manufacturer, could be prepared by an electrical engineer, a design professional that is familiar with this light. A lot of this is you plug the information into a software and it produces this image. So what you'll see on this, they establish a grid pattern on the ground and then also kind of set in the criteria of the lights that they are using. So they'll plug in the light height, the amount of lumens off that light or the watts of that light, and they'll start laying out their design based on that. Just like you would inside of a building, you would apply that outside the building. So this grid pattern is established so that you can start seeing the foot candle levels that are cast on the ground. And generally what you want to see is a 1 foot candle or less at the property line. That's kind of how we have it set up in our ordinances. And you'll see that similar in others. Some will use a half foot candle, but generally 1 foot is the maximum that you'd want to see. Now we are allowing for some criteria. It's one thing that in IDA or the Missouri portion of IDA that had reviewed the ordinance, they kind of questioned on that as not allowing any spillover on like properties. But for instance, like when you have a convenience store next to a fast food restaurant that have the same light levels on the property, generally we're not going to look at trying to limit the criteria of the spillover between their two property lines, as you kind of want that consistent light glow or level across those property lines. So they can share those on-site lighting features. So if you're looking at this grid pattern, like I said, it does kind of start kicking out those foot candles. And this plan is what we had utilized. Basically, they'd show the property line around the site. And then we can take this plan and confirm with the light levels that they are showing and they're meeting the criteria of the foot candles that we're allowed by the ordinance. And also the light specifications that are being shown, we can confirm the heights of the poles. We are limiting the height of some of the light poles in some sites. Some locations it will be a smaller or shorter pole, and some locations they're allowed to be taller. And again, the plan submittal, I mean, it just also would cover the design professional, who's preparing, who's the author of this plan. So we have some kind of the criteria to go by. So some of the discussions that have came up based on the draft ordinance and that came up during the meeting with the commission was in regards to the downtown area. For the most part, I mean, great positive feedback and overall the draft of the ordinance, we're getting some good feedback from the commission as well as IDA about our ordinance. But there were some discussions and thought about the downtown area and maybe treating it a little differently and trying to be more in compliance with what you might see historically at older times in the community. And we are finding out that in those areas, there are recommendations of using that warmer amber color type light, 3,000 kelvins or lower on the light levels. So that's something we're looking at now, and also trying to define that boundary where we might propose this. We have several boundaries that's already established in the city for the downtown area. So we're just trying to coordinate those two together to come up with something that's already defined. Also, further defining the temporary and seasonal lighting requirements, such as holiday lighting. Holiday lighting are exempt from the ordinance, but there are in some cases where some business owners generally will display those year round, and they may not be a colorful light, but they may just be a constant white light or an amber type light. So trying to clarify some of those, that's something we're still looking into and trying to get some feedback to the commission on of maybe how we can better handle those to either limit or continue to allow for those to occur that's already there, or how is it appropriate to address those. And at the end of the day, I don't think we want to see just a lot of these starting to pop up because people are wanting to provide additional lighting. They don't necessarily provide anything as far as for security. That's more of just an aesthetic thing. Existing lighting maintenance, as I kind of mentioned before, we have set some criteria in the ordinance for the existing lighting and maintenance of those. If you're changing out the head of the pole, or if you're changing out a light bulb or so forth, something like that, then you're pretty much exempt. But now if you're removing the entire lighting fixture and replacing your complete lighting fixtures with a new theme or a new light type, then yes, they would need to be evaluated and comply to the ordinance. We run into situations like this on larger parking areas, such as a big box store or a car dealership, those type of parking lots where there's a lot of light being cast off of those. We've been discussing about an IDA, the International Dark Sky Association membership, something we consider looking into there and maybe becoming a member of that. Also, there's been discussions about forming some form of a steering committee for public outreach, also to help make that public outreach out to the community as well, and not just have it where it's the city of Ozark or the staff or the board making those outreach, but also looking at making a committee to assist with that. Ordinance enforcement and non-compliance. That's one of the biggest issues right now, would be the enforcement side. It's easy to get a plan to review and confirm that it meets the criteria and ordinance. But when it comes to the enforcement outside of after the fact, that's where it gets a little more difficult. That's where we'd have to do some additional staff training and probably potentially purchase a device that might read the light levels on the ground, or work with someone that might have those already in place that could assist with some of that evaluation. To be honest, right now, what we are geared for is we can go out in the field during inspection and construction. We can confirm the lights are there and point in the right direction, but we wouldn't be able to read the light levels on the ground if there is a challenge of someone making a code enforcement complaint. We are currently geared and set up to handle the permitting side and review that, but just not the enforcement in the field. So that's something we got to work through and keep in mind there. And then challenges with property owners and businesses. I mean, even after the fact of getting some form of permit and approval, we will struggle with some even complying with that. If we do get a complaint, we have confirmed that there is an issue with their light levels. And then also just if they feel like it's maintenance, but actually they're going a little beyond the maintenance and getting them to come into compliance with getting the appropriate approval and permitting on that. Staff capacity and training for permitting enforcement. Kind of like I said, there potentially will be some additional training for in-field investigations, but currently in office during the permitting side, there's nothing of concern there. It's just more of that in-field and enforcement and permitting side there, or taking care of any code enforcement complaints. Same thing with the field inspection enforcement. I kind of mentioned before about the additional permitting requirements. Right now, there's nothing in place that would require any additional type permit required, or based on the draft ordinance. We're not doing anything that would be required already if someone was wanting to do some kind of site lighting or electrical plan or electrical improvements on their site. There was a discussion, maybe concerns about the developer, the applicant, maybe a cost that they would incur for developing this plan. And honestly, that's something we can't control. I mean, some might have a cost, some might not. I know the ones I've worked on in the past, the light manufacturer actually provided that as a service. Of course, you had to use their lights, but that's just something they had worked out with that developer or owner. That's really nothing we can control on that side. Citizen complaints and enforcement, again, I know that we will get complaints. We already have complaints now, even with the overlay ordinance that we have. Is in that ordinance, we note that light cannot be directed toward off-site properties. We have those complaints now. We try our best to enforce those, but getting the business owners to comply with that is always difficult. We work with them to provide some kind of shielding in those fixtures. There's a lot of things that you can do by adjusting the head of the light fixture or shielding to kind of deter or remove that off-site lighting casting. Again, equipment purchase requirements for field inspection, something we definitely need to look into. At this time, I don't have an idea of the cost of what that might be. We just haven't made it that far as we're going through this. And then the photometric plan requirements. We are noting the requirements of what's to be submitted on those plans for staff to review or a third party to review, depending on the complexity of that. If this ordinance is in place, I mean, the anticipation it would be just follow just like any other ordinance that we have in place and enforced. I mean, nothing really out of the norm or new. It's just like we'd enforce a zoning ordinance for building materials, a zoning ordinance for the parking requirements or landscape requirements. This is just like any other ordinance that would go in place, and we review that ordinance or review the submittal for compliance to that ordinance. And then during the inspections in the field for getting an occupancy of a facility, they would have to just follow the approved plans and make sure they're in compliance with those to be satisfied by the city's requirements. So that's kind of all I had on that. I do hope that you've had a chance to review that ordinance. I would like to get some feedback, as I would like to give an update to the commission. In drafting this ordinance, it was a great experience, I guess, or education about kind of what we're finding out there. We feel like this is a pretty relaxing ordinance as far as what could be required. In some of the comments from IDA, they were suggesting some little more stricter guidelines. We also felt like it wasn't appropriate to provide requirements for a single family or a two family residential structure. Those could get pretty difficult at times. But in summary, though, we feel like this is a really good draft ordinance, and with addressing some of the questions that have been brought up today, I mean, staff would be happy to continue with this ordinance and address those concerns and propose a final ordinance to have in place. Again, like any ordinance, there will be things that we discover after the fact that we'll need to come back and tweak or revise. We know that there will be some frustrations by developers. We know it'll be conversations at our counter that will not be the best conversations, but there are hurdles that we will have to get through as we go through and implementing an ordinance like this. And it is unique. It is unique in saying unique, it's unique to this area. It's unique to requirements of what we'll see from our neighbors. Like I said, Springfield does have something in place, and a lot of times we do look at Springfield because they have already gone through a lot of these hurdles and putting things in place that we can rely on and look to and ask those questions. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Mr. Galloway, you got a question?
Yes, thank you. It sounds like, Cameron, and I do want you to tell me if I'm in the right direction or not. It sounds like we're taking a very modest approach with this ordinance. And one of the things that you are balancing is sounds like you want to make sure if we were going to expand it, that you would know how to deal with issues that are raised by people affected by the ordinance, that you would want to understand that you have the equipment that's correct, you have the training that's correct, and also, approaches to resolving disputes and feedback correct. Am I right there in engaging why this is a modest approach?
Yeah, that is correct. We spent many months on trying to come up with a draft that we were comfortable with to take to the commission and speak to them about this. What I would say, it's a happy median of strict ordinance or no ordinance at all. To me, it's a comfortable ordinance. I think based on what we see today and kind of the new norm of what's going on with newer developments, I don't see a big concern with this. And you're correct there. It's the struggle I think we will have is once it's in place is the enforcement, the backing of enforcement, and what happens when we just see the complaints, as we always will. No matter what we do, reason to complain. You just know that. But yeah, that is what it is. It's a new ordinance that we will be unique because Springfield, to my knowledge, is really the only one around that has something kind of more geared to this kind of criteria as opposed to just kind of this blanket statement of no light to be cast on your neighboring properties or direct owner or direct lighting away. But yes, you are correct on that. To me, it's a good start.
And then, my feedback on that, I have to say that it isn't something that I considered, but I do know that this is, in terms of measuring compliance, is something that's going to have to take some time to adjust to. So I think I understand the approach, the conservative approach you're taking. I would just add that, for me, this would be a beginning point, and a point where the city administration can learn how to implement it. And then city council down the road can look at, increasing it to making it broader. And then, I recall we had a long hearing about a development that was going to happen south side. I think the Stinger family was behind it. One of the complaints that were raised by people who already lived there that we were going to annex into was light pollution. It was one of the things that they liked about living south of Ozark. This sense that they are still out in the country, and the night sky and so on. And, it struck me that in terms of getting the kind of development that we want, I think developers that are on the south side that are looking for higher profit margins and so on have an opportunity to market that ultimately as a good place to live, to get that more rural feel. But I do take your point, though, that we probably need to get some experience under our feet before we can move on to an ordinance that requires it. That's my feedback.
Mr. Stewart?
This was first talked about just before I left in 2016. I was adamantly opposed to what was proposed at that time. This is a far superior proposal to what we initially saw back then. And I have no problem with what you propose here. I think I have no problem with what you've proposed. This is vastly superior. I'd say good job on cleaning this thing up and getting it to the point where it is. I might differ with Mr. Galloway on whether it needs to be a starting point to get more strict, but this I would not have any problems with whatsoever.
Right, Eddie. Mr. Branch.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'd like to address Bruce's comments. In my discussions with IDA, this is exactly what they tell you to do. Because you're in a region that dark skies is unknown. People don't understand the concept of what it is. History tells us that light is better and dark is where the boogeyman lives. So the whole thing is regarding training and education. So by taking steps this slowly, and I think staff has done a marvelous job of putting this together in such a short time, I think that IDA would be behind this process completely, because we could take baby steps, as they put it. So we can be out and we can be educating not only the elected officials, but we can also be educating the folks in town to the importance of safety, of taking care of our nocturnal animals, all the processes that the dark sky process does. But we have to start somewhere. And if you take a process like this and you pile on so many regulations, so many rules, it will just scare people. And they will immediately back off and say, this is way too much. I don't want anything to do with this. So with staff saying, let's look at the downtown area first, then we can show how this can be a benefit to that region and ultimately to the whole town. So I applaud staff for the direction they're going, and I think IDA would.
Very good. Any other, Mr. Flores?
Yeah, I was just gonna. I think it's great as well. The one thing we might, as far as cost to developers and things like that, I think if you go to, not saying that our ordinance is saying it this way, but if you go and you try to get a dark sky stamped fixture that actually has the approval on it, it's a much more expensive fixture, even though you can get a fixture that's an equivalent that's qualified and it's not dark sky, certified. It's comparable in cost to anything else. But I think the main BUG rating, which is your backlight, your uplight, and your glare, which is what you're trying to meet that bar to make it dark sky compliant. I think I don't know if it really helped, because if we put that in the ordinance just to meet these qualifications, it might be a little more clear to the developer as far as when they hand that to the lighting guy, what they're really looking for. Because I know when we went through this a while back, you kind of had to go through like a crash course education on that to find out what it took to make any light fixture where it would be considered dark sky compliant. So we might add that language in there and make sure they understand, which I think it does read well, as far as not saying it has to be a dark sky certified fixture. It just has to make sure it meets those qualifications. And as far as the Kelvin, which is your color temperature, they call it a temperature. It's really just the color of the light. Yeah, that 3000 K is a good spot because it meets the qualification, and every outside light comes in 5,000, 4,000, and 3,000 K. So it's a very typical fixture. I don't think that's going to add much cost to anybody either. They'll just, when they go and they order it from the manufacturer, they just basically have to specify to have 3000 K, not the cooler looking lights 4,000 and 5,000 go to. So anyway, I think it's great. I think we'll be able to do a good job with it. And I think if we can clear up just a little bit of that information, just so it makes it clearer what we're asking of them. Not that we've done a bad job with it at all. I just that BUG rating might be something we add in there just so they kind of understand what we're getting at.
Yeah, we can definitely draft something. The intent was never to require anything that was certified or anything like that. They just need to meet the criteria. And even the thought of the title of the ordinance, one thing I did like about Springfield is their ordinance is, I can't remember the title now, it's just a lighting ordinance. It doesn't say dark sky lighting. And that may be something to consider too, is maybe the title of the ordinance isn't dark sky, it's a lighting ordinance. And that might help deter some of that concerns about the compliance. LEED. I mean, you hear a lot with LEED stuff. Just to get the certification saying LEED is more costly than just generally would do with being LEED certified. So yeah, we can draft something in there just to convey that, yes, there's nothing that requires any dark sky certification type product.
Yeah, I think that helps out a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why discussions like this are helpful, because Cameron has been working on this for 4 years or more, and we don't want to bring something forward that's going to be too controversial or I mean, we want to make sure we do it right the first time. And RJ, I appreciate your background and expertise in this. So, and Cameron, that was a good idea about taking dark sky out of the title, because that could be kind of scary to some people. But bottom line is, there's going to be an ordinance coming forth. And this is there's a lot of information in the packet. And we've been working on this for a long time. So I would just encourage all of you after listening to it this morning, to go back and read it, make sure you understand it, and be prepared to discuss it at first reading. Because if we're going to put this in an ordinance, we need to know what we're doing. So any other comments or questions from the board or from staff? We've completed the agenda items, I think. So if there's nothing else, Steve, do you have anything to add?
No, I really appreciate you guys being on here. I know it was a short week. It was a short week for staff too, but good job, staff, putting everything together and getting all ready for the board. Great questions today. Thanks, everyone. And I don't have anything else to add, sir.
All right, if there's nothing else to add, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Okay, who said move? I didn't.
Bruce.
Bruce, all right. And then I saw Mr. Stewart raise his hand, so we'll go with Bruce making the motion to adjourn, seconded by Stewart. All in favor? Stand up, wave.